Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and felt nothing? Not coldness, not anger, just emptiness, as if the light of a soul, the energy of life, simply wasn't there. This experience is more common than we often admit, and it leaves a haunting question in our hearts. Can a person walk this earth without a soul? Before we dive into this question through the lens of Spiritism, let me share a story that changed the way I see people forever. Years ago, I met a man during a visit to a correctional facility. I was there as part of a volunteer program, bringing books and spiritual comfort to inmates. Among them was a young man named Gabriel. He was quiet, polite, even kind. But when I looked into his eyes, there was nothing. Not sorrow, not remorse, not fear, just a dark void, as if I were looking through a window into a room where no one lived. I tried to connect with him through conversation, through prayer, through presence. But every time, I felt like my words floated into an abyss. He listened, but didn't feel. He responded, but didn't connect. He told me once, "People think I'm evil. I'm not. I just don't care." That sentence never left me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't rebellion. It was apathy, total emotional and spiritual disconnection. That encounter haunted me until one night, reading The Spirit's Book by Allan Kardec, I stumbled upon a passage that shed light on Gabriel's strange void. Spiritism teaches that the soul is not just a poetic idea. It's the immortal essence of a being. But the soul can be asleep. It can be disconnected. It can even be absent temporarily from conscious influence, submerged in materialism or suffering, as if wrapped in layers of darkness that block the light from reaching the surface. Could it be that Gabriel's soul was there, but deeply buried under pain, karma, or choices that slowly turned his inner light off? Or could it be, as some spiritist cases suggest, that certain incarnated beings are momentarily animated by what Kardec calls quasi-intelligent fluids, where a true spirit isn't fully active or present? These are deep questions, and they may sound frightening at first. But don't worry, this episode is not about fear. It's about awareness, compassion, and understanding the subtle signs of spiritual disconnection in others and in ourselves. Because sometimes the absence we see in someone else reflects a part of us we haven't dared to face. Let us journey now into the Spiritist understanding of what it means to have, or lack, a conscious connection with the soul, and how recognizing the spiritual void in others can teach us to reconnect more deeply with our own essence. In the next part, we'll explore what Spiritism says about incarnated spirits who seem absent or soulless, and what this really means from a doctrinal perspective. In Spiritism, we learn that the body is a temporary vessel, a tool for the soul's growth through incarnation. But just because a person is alive, breathing, and walking among us, doesn't mean their soul is fully present in their conscious behavior. Allan Kardec, in The Spirit's Book, poses a powerful question, question 134. What is the soul? The answer, an incarnated spirit. The body is only its temporary envelope. But what happens when the soul, although technically incarnated, is no longer actively guiding the being's choices, emotions, and moral compass? This is where Spiritist teachings offer profound insight. According to the doctrine, there are conditions in which a spirit may become detached from moral awareness. This doesn't mean the soul is gone, but it may be in a state of dormancy, heavily influenced by past trauma, intense materialism, or karmic burdens. Let's consider the concept of moral obfuscation. When a spirit incarnates and lives without nurturing conscience, love, or empathy, it slowly disconnects from its divine center. The light of the soul dims. The body continues functioning, but the presence of the spirit becomes faint, almost imperceptible. In some rare cases, higher spirits explain that certain incarnated beings may have temporarily suspended their conscious spiritual will, almost like a spiritual anesthesia. These are not empty shells. Rather, they are souls in eclipse. Kardec also introduces the idea of obsession, a situation where a weaker spirit becomes influenced or controlled by a lower entity. This creates a state in which a person's gaze may reflect something not quite human, because what we see is not their true essence, but a shadow over it. Chico Xavier, through the teachings of Emmanuel, spoke often about the importance of spiritual vigilance. He once said, "A soul that neglects prayer, forgets love, An abandoned conscience will walk in the world, but not live in the light. This doesn't mean such a person is condemned. On the contrary, Spiritism teaches that all souls are redeemable, no matter how lost they may seem. But for some, the disconnection is so deep that they appear spiritually inert. This can manifest in chilling ways. A complete absence of empathy, a blank, unresponsive look, even in moments of emotional intensity, a mechanical, repetitive way of speaking or acting, a discomfort in the presence of spiritual or emotional energy. In Spiritist centers, workers are trained to recognize these signs not with judgment, but with compassion and spiritual discernment. So, are there people without a soul? No. According to Spiritism, every human being has a soul, but not every soul is actively present in its highest form. Some are hidden, some are asleep, some are suffering in silence beneath layers of spiritual dust accumulated through lifetimes of neglect. And some, perhaps like Gabriel, have chosen to incarnate in extremely limited conditions, either to pay off karmic debts, to experience moral re-education, or as a result of their own resistance to spiritual growth. The gaze we fear, that haunting emptiness behind the eyes, is not always a sign of evil. Often, it's a cry for help from a soul that has forgotten its light. In the next part, we'll reflect on the gospel and how Jesus viewed such souls, not with fear, but with infinite mercy, and how Spiritism calls us to see even the darkest eyes with the hope of spiritual rebirth. When we think of someone whose eyes reflect emptiness, our first reaction might be fear or judgment. But how did Jesus respond to those who seemed lost, emotionally numb, or spiritually disconnected? He looked at them with compassion. Again and again in the Gospels, we see Christ approach those whom society had rejected, the lepers, the possessed, the adulterous, the corrupt, and rather than turn away, he saw them. Not just their behavior, not just their suffering, but their divine origin, their latent potential, their soul. There's a passage in the Gospel according to Luke, chapter 8, that speaks volumes. It tells the story of a man possessed by many spirits, living among the tombs, naked, screaming, isolated. The townspeople feared him. They had chained him before, but he broke free in madness. To everyone, he was a lost cause, someone dangerous, spiritually unhinged. But Jesus approached him with calm authority. He didn't see a monster. He saw a spirit in torment. After a brief but powerful exchange, the man was freed. The spirits left him, and the text says, the man from whom the demons had gone out sat at Jesus' feet, dressed and in his right mind. This is not just a story of exorcism. It is a lesson in spiritual perception. Where others saw emptiness, Jesus saw a wounded child of God. Where others turned away, he came close. Where others saw danger, he saw the potential for healing. In the Spiritist interpretation of the Gospel, especially in the work The Gospel According to Spiritism by Allan Kardec, we learn that many of the possessed of biblical times were in fact victims of spiritual obsession. Incarnated spirits influenced by disincarnate beings who vibrated in darkness, feeding off fear, anger, or despair. Spiritism doesn't romanticize this. It takes it seriously. But it also teaches us not to hate or fear such individuals. Why? Because these are not soulless people. They are, in many cases, souls in bondage. And when we encounter someone whose eyes feel vacant, the gospel teaches us to remember this truth. No one is beyond redemption. Chico Xavier, echoing Emmanuel, once said, no matter how heavy the darkness around the soul, a single spark of love can begin the transformation. This is why Spiritist centers offer passes, prayers, fluidic treatments, and above all, moral guidance. Not only to help those affected by obsession or disconnection, but to remind them of who they truly are, children of God. That void we sometimes see in others is not an absence of a soul, it's the absence of connection with their essence. And that can change through prayer, through love, through sincere acts of charity and emotional reawakening. Let this reflection be a call to remember, Jesus didn't come for the perfect. He came for the lost, the confused, the spiritually paralyzed, and he called them back to life. In the same way, we are invited, as spiritists and as human beings, to look beyond appearances and trust that even behind the darkest eyes, there is a soul yearning to be seen, forgiven, and loved. We spent the last few minutes talking about recognizing the absence of a soul's light in others. But now, I want to gently turn the mirror toward you. Let's pause, breathe, and ask a question that might feel uncomfortable, but deeply necessary. Have you ever looked in the mirror and not recognized yourself? Not because your appearance changed, not because you've aged or had a bad day, but because something inside felt dimmed, disconnected, lost. We often speak of people who seem to lack a soul. But what if, at times, that person has been us? Moments when we're overwhelmed by material worries, when resentment, pain, or exhaustion silences our inner voice, when our gaze turns inward and all we see is fog. Have you ever gone through days, or even years, feeling like a version of yourself that no longer lives with purpose, with joy, with hope? If so, I want you to know something deeply spiritist and profoundly true. Your soul is still there. It never left. You may have silenced it. You may have forgotten it. You may have buried it under noise, pain, or pride, but it waits, quietly, patiently, like a flame beneath the ashes. In spiritist philosophy, the soul never disappears. Even when we feel lost, we are not truly lost. We are on the journey back to ourselves. That journey can take lifetimes. It can be painful, but it is sacred. And the first step often begins with a question like this: am I living with my soul fully awake? Jesus once asked, what good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet lose their soul? This isn't just about ambition. It's about disconnection, about forgetting what really matters. In spiritist terms, we might ask, am I choosing values over vanity? Am I choosing forgiveness over control? Am I choosing love over fear? Because every small decision, every thought, every reaction either awakens the soul or puts it back to sleep. So I ask you now, with all the love and honesty of someone who has struggled too, is your inner light shining, or has it dimmed? And if it has dimmed, what can you do today, now, in this very moment, to begin to relight it? Sometimes all it takes is a prayer spoken from the heart, a moment of silence with your own conscience, a word of kindness to someone else, a pause before reacting with anger, a whisper to your spirit guides, help me remember who I am. This episode isn't about diagnosing others as soulless. It's about recognizing that we all go through spiritual droughts, moments when we forget that we are divine in origin and powerful in love. But it also reminds us that no one, not even ourselves, is beyond the reach of light. Now that we've explored the concept of spiritual disconnection in others and within ourselves, it's time to bring these ideas down from the clouds and into the ground beneath our feet. Because Spiritism, at its heart, is not just a philosophy for study. It is a way of living. So, how do we apply this awareness, this sensitivity to the soul, in our everyday lives? How do we learn to protect our own light, recognize the spiritual sleep of others, and respond not with fear, but with wisdom and love? Let's start with self-observation. One of the most powerful tools in the Spiritist practice is the examination of conscience. At the end of the day, ask yourself, was I present today, or just going through the motions? Did I speak with my heart, or just react? Did I make space for silence, for prayer, for contact with the divine? These are not acts of guilt. They are acts of spiritual hygiene. Just as we wash our bodies, we must care for our soul's clarity. Then comes the practice of charity, not just in giving food or money, but in giving presence. When we encounter someone who feels empty, distant, or even hostile, we have a choice. We can mirror their coldness, or we can respond with warmth. Imagine this scenario. You walk into your workplace and see someone who always seems closed off. They rarely smile. Their eyes don't meet yours. Instead of thinking, what's wrong with them? Try thinking, what must their soul be going through? Offer a silent prayer. Smile gently. Send light. This is not weakness. This is spiritual maturity. As Chico Xavier said, even if someone rejects your kindness, your vibration remains, and the spirits see it. Spiritism also encourages us to strengthen our inner connection through daily practices. Here are some suggestions. Morning prayer and mental alignment. Before the day begins, spend 5 minutes in silence. Connect with your spirit mentors. Ask for protection and clarity. Reading the gospel at home. A few minutes reading from the gospel according to Spiritism can reset your emotional field and help recenter your moral compass. Thought monitoring. Try to observe your thoughts throughout the day. When negativity arises, pause, redirect, pray, or simply breathe. Service to others. Help someone. Listen. Encourage. Every act of love strengthens your connection with your soul and weakens the pull of spiritual disconnection. Now, what about those around us who feel soulless? Spiritism teaches boundaries with compassion. We are not called to absorb others' darkness, nor to try and save everyone. But we are invited to offer silent prayers, avoid judgmental thoughts, protect our own energy through elevated vibration, and when possible, offer a loving word or gesture. Some people will resist, some may lash out, but others, even if they don't show it, will feel the touch of your soul, and that touch may be the beginning of their return. Remember, a single match can light a candle. A single candle can light a room. A soul reawakened can transform a life. As we come to the end of this journey, I want to invite you to close your eyes for a moment. Just breathe. Feel your heart beating, not your physical heart, but your spiritual center, your sacred self, the part of you that existed before this body and will exist long after it. That is your soul, and it has never left you. In this life, we will meet many kinds of people, some radiant, some heavy, some whose eyes reflect love, and others whose gaze seems to echo emptiness. But Spiritism reminds us, every soul has a story. No one arrives at disconnection by accident. Behind every dark stare, there is a history of wounds, of karmic debts, of forgotten prayers, and unfinished lessons. We do not need to fear these people, nor do we need to hate or avoid them. We simply need to see them as Jesus would, with understanding, with limits, with compassion. But more importantly, we need to see ourselves with that same mercy, because at some point in our journey, we all fall asleep inside. We all forget who we are. We all get lost in the noise, the roles, the expectations. But the soul, your soul, waits, patiently, lovingly. And the moment you decide to turn inward, even with the smallest intention, it responds. You do not need to become perfect to reconnect. You just need to become present. Close your eyes again. Say, silently or aloud, I am a soul in progress. I may fall, but I am not lost. I choose to live with light. This choice, this sacred decision, is how we protect our essence in a world that often tries to make us forget it. Valdo Franco once said, when the soul is in silence, God whispers. When the heart is in pain, the spirit awakens. So if you feel distant, if someone you love seems spiritually absent, if the world looks hollow through tired eyes, remember, the light never leaves us. It may dim, it may flicker, but it is eternal. As you go on with your day, be a guardian of your own light. Speak to your guides. Read a verse from the gospel. Offer kindness where it's least expected. And above all, return to yourself again and again. Because behind your eyes, there is a soul. Alive, growing, sacred. And the world needs that soul awake. Thank you for walking with me through this deep reflection. If this episode touched your heart, share it. Not for views, but because maybe, just maybe, someone out there, behind empty eyes, is waiting for a reason to remember who they are. Let's be that reason. Let's be light.